when you think of scions and psychics and power of the mind, often you don't think of D&D anymore. Psionics have not had an official published place in D&D 5e at all. We had a few subclasses come out with Tasha's Cauldron, but otherwise it is not only an archetype but a state of mind that has had almost no love to it ever since. And even the subclasses that came out were lackluster, honestly. I haven't seen anyone play them as amazing as their flavor is. So, as I've been working through, since about the publishment of Tasha's, creating Homebrew, I wanted to start getting into larger and more polished expansions. And I find that the best way to keep me motivated is to keep me accountable. And so I just wanted to start into a series diving into progress and concepts and just keeping an audio, like a visual diary, if nothing else, to make sure I don't get lost in the sauce. I started with the psychic class. It is going to be a full class rivaling the wizard in its mastery of the psionics. Absolutely unrelated to the arcane. I didn't really like the mystic from UA, so I didn't want to try to balance that. None of their attempts at scions have really seemed to work. And this is coming from someone who's played scions back in 3.5, back in Pathfinder 1. I have to say Pathfinder 1 now. That's. But ultimately, I just wanted, if anything, just for my own sake, or for ideas from a viewer, in order to keep everything moving. As I look over the psychic, the name I settled on, because scion, psionic, have like repeating the same word over and over tends to only add confusion. I had previously made a martial support class that was initially just called the Marshal, and it was so confusing to be like your martial ability, so on and so forth. And it was a good gag for about 5 minutes. And then anytime I said it out loud, I hated it. I had to rename everything. I went through and stripped the word martial from everything except, weapons and melee combat and all that. So as I made the psychic, I wanted to avoid just using the word scion everywhere for all the same things. There's a lot of terminology I stripped out from the 3.5 chassis of what the scion was. Most notably, I stopped calling them powers, because it was like casting psionic powers. It sounds like the kind of bullshit you say in character for it. I thought it sounded a little nicer for manifesting a psionic expression, because this is your power, you're just using it in much the same way that the arcane is simply like twisting the weave in order to create a spell. So in that same vein, it is simply, this is the power of your mind, and this is how you're choosing to express it. I wanted to bring back the focus mechanic from 3.5, which I read through all of the expanded Psionic's Handbook, all of the complete Psionic, and all that. They don't explain too much what the purpose of focus is, aside from you set it up now and you're good. The Mystic brought focus in, but for a word that's literally this close to concentration, it's not at all like it. It is a synonym, and it should at least function in some way to it if you're going to make it like that. But instead, it's simply you wake up, you turn it on, and you're good to go until something knocks you out. And what's the fucking point? you don't have to include that. Once you hit the point of you just wake up and it's on, just leave it on. So instead, I introduced stealing a lot of terminology from people who actually, from like paranormal belief and all that. I instead made it like a state of focus called your inner conduit. And so you have to essentially make concentration checks to keep it open, but intelligence based, not constitution based, because it is your mind, not your body, that is doing all of this. So you wait. It's a bonus action to open your conduit, and you're good as long as for all the same things. If you take damage, make the intelligence save, so on and so forth. But otherwise, I wanted to really stay away from just making this a different kind of caster, because that's always been something that annoyed me when other people made psionics. Is it's just casting. It doesn't feel at all different, which anyone who's played Scions before in any other game will tell you that it's fun because it's different. So I really want to avoid making it just pseudo spells as much as possible. There are some areas where it's going to overlap, but I really just want to keep it feeling fresh, because that's been the main appeal through just the entire time psionics have existed in D&D in any form. So, and then at first level, you get a discipline. The disciplines are based on the six orders of psionic, like psionic expressions, except I only made 5 of them because I wanted to put psychokineticism, moving things with your mind, as more of a wilder thing. So the psychic gets it split up between 2 of the other ones, and otherwise their 5 subclasses are based entirely upon like one of those, and it's fleshing out the fantasy. At high level, it does get pretty wild, but otherwise, that's that. There are no cantrips in psionic ability. There's none of like that talent. So I saw someone call him a knack at one point. You have the Awakened, which is fully telepath and a little bit of psychokineticism. They're blue mages from Magic. You don't have to think too deeply about that one. The Immortal are psychometabolic, which is to say they would be called egoists in other things. They are mind over matter. They're like proficiency with medium armor, shields, and martial weapons. They want to be in melee because that is the element they're going to thrive in. Mediums are meta-creative. I want to like sew into this a little bit of other paranormal flavor. So you are pulling ectoplasm, pulling the fog of the ethereal plane down to shape things, but also you're closing the doorway. You're making a spectral form for yourself. Nomads are the most straightforward. They specialize in psychomotion. You want to teleport. You don't get more straightforward than psychomotion. The Seers are clairvoyant, or clairsentient is the specialization for it. And that kind of writes itself. I currently have 4 psionic feats, which is just essentially just psionic, magic initiate, hostile mind, which plays against psionics, psionic warrior, which is warcaster for scions, and sight beyond, which is based on a 3-5 feet called like burrow-in power or something to that effect, where it's simply as long as you have some kind of connection to them, you can try to ignore line of sight requirements and physical barriers. I made Psionics a skill on par with Arcana. It's so far it's straightforward. I'm mostly keeping myself on track because I want to start on the Ardent next. The Ardent is going to be a half Scion, half Martial. I'm going to use a lot of specializations from Scions that existed, such as like Lurk, and I want to take the Soul Knife away from Rogue, but I really like it being Rogue. I'm just going to rework it entirely to fit with this new scheme of everything. But ultimately, I do see the Ardent fulfilling not necessarily a paladin like role, but if like paladin and rangers are the half casters that we have in the game already, and artificers are the closest thing to an arcane half caster we have, this will evolve itself into being kind of in that vein for scions. I'm foreseeing maybe a monkey kind of thing. I I want to rework monks as well because I've said for a long time I hate key and that it should work like side points. But ultimately, that really wouldn't change much about the class aside from just letting it multi-class better into these other things. For Psionic Expressions, I don't have much going on so far. I figured that will be relatively easier than everything else. So I wanted to run that through last because there was so much material printed in the past 3.5.4 and Pathfinder and everything that to get like a starting basis for that, I have kind of limited it down to the six disciplines. I wanted to differentiate it through its versatility. So Psionics won't work like magic because you don't have the Vancian slots. You're instead getting the psi points, and your only limit is the mental strain your mind can survive through in order to cast it. The Wilder is going to have more play with strain than the Psychic, just like it had in 3.5. But ultimately, this is going to be a mind over matter supplement. And as interested as I am in how it's going to go, I want to have an update with you guys, mostly for my own accountability. Maybe you guys will find something you like as well. Like, psi crystals are here for the Psychic. They get an intelligence save version of Uncanny Dot. Was it Uncanny? No, Evasion. Build in your mental palace, opening the gate into the ethereal realm and all that. It's going to be a lot of work, and I already have a headache trying to translate how many psi points you get at what level. It is so much work I've put on my own plate because I really just wanted to bring psionics into 5e or whatever equivalent I do end up settling with. So if this is going to be a recurring series, if you guys do enjoy it, I do want to share with you more as development continues. Thank you and good night.